Have you ever been fascinated by the mysteries of how people act? Psychology is a fascinating field that studies how the mind works, from the small biases that affect how we see things to the big effects that social relationships have on the choices we make. This video goes over 10 mind-blowing psychological facts that will make you question what you think you know about how people think, feel, and act in the world. If you're interested in psychology and want to learn more, or if you're just curious about the hidden forces that affect how people act, this video is sure to educate and interest you. Come along with us on this journey of discovery as we try to figure out the mysteries of the mind and the strange things that happen in our daily lives. Read to the end to find out things that might change how you see the world and yourself. Before we begin, I would appreciate it if you like the video, you can help me continue spreading the Stoic philosophy. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. If you like the topic of this video, please comment on number 1. If you don't, please comment on number 0 to let me know, so I can make a better video for you. Now let's begin. 1. The halo effect. Cognitive biases are at the root of the halo effect, a psychological phenomenon that shows how complicated it is for people to see and judge things. This shows up as a tendency where our overall opinion of a person affects how we judge their specific traits or qualities. Imagine this: when we see someone we find physically attractive, it often sets off a chain of unconscious assumptions that make us automatically think good things about them, like how smart, charismatic, or kind they are. Even though this seems like a harmless phenomenon, it has a big effect on how we interact with others, make decisions, and even get evaluated at work. Think about a situation where a job interviewer is so charmed by a candidate that they don't notice any problems with their qualifications or experience because they are too caught up in the halo effect. In the same way, people who wear the halo may find that others admire or forgive them too much in personal relationships because their perceived beauty hides any flaws or shortcomings they may have. Furthermore, the halo effect shows how superficial traits can greatly affect how we see and judge things, frequently leading to wrong and skewed judgments. These mental shortcuts can help you make quick decisions, but they can also reinforce stereotypes, hurt diversity, and make it harder to think clearly. Recognizing and reducing the halo effect gives us the power to give more nuanced, unbiased assessments, which promotes a culture of fairness, acceptance, and real understanding. 2. Cognitive dissonance. This is a very old idea in psychology called cognitive dissonance. It shows how our beliefs and actions interact with each other and how uncomfortable it is when they don't match up. Think about this situation. You know that smoking is bad for your health, but you still find yourself reaching for a cigarette. The conflict between what you know and what you do makes you feel uneasy. This, my dear reader, is cognitive dissonance at work. At its core, cognitive dissonance is the mental discomfort that people feel when they have beliefs, attitudes, or actions that are at odds with their values or what they know. This discordance makes people want to get rid of the tension, which pushes them toward a state of cognitive harmony. People often use a range of coping strategies, from rationalization and justification to outright denial, to find this balance. Take the smoker from earlier as an example. They are probably struggling with how to balance their habit with the health risks they know they are taking. To get rid of this inner conflict, they may play down the risks of smoking, telling themselves that the risks aren't as bad as they seem, or that they are immune to the bad effects of smoking. People try to get their beliefs and actions to match up by doing mental gymnastics like these. This gives them a sense of internal consistency. However, cognitive dissonance isn't just a problem when it comes to healthy behaviors. It affects many other parts of our lives as well. Different ideas can affect everything from our political and religious beliefs to the things we buy and the people we interact with. This clash of ideas has a big effect on how we think, feel, and act. Cognitive dissonance also shows how complicated the relationship is between reason and emotion, which sheds light on the complicated processes that make people make decisions. Cognitive consonance often leads us astray, blurring the lines between objective truth and subjective perception, even when we say we believe in rationality. Understanding cognitive dissonance gives us valuable information about the human mind, including the complicated web of drives, biases, and ways of coping that govern our daily lives. We can better understand and navigate the maze of competing beliefs when we know this information. This will help us work toward a more harmonious alignment of our thoughts, actions, and values. Stoicism encourages individuals to approach sex and beauty with moderation, self-discipline, and a focus on inner virtue rather than external desires. By practicing self-control and cultivating virtuous qualities, the Stoics believe that individuals can attain a deeper sense of fulfillment and contentment in their lives. 3. The Baader-Meinhof Phenomenon. The Baader-Meinhof Phenomenon, which is an interesting cognitive phenomenon, also known as the frequency illusion, shows us how our perception and attention work in strange ways. Imagine finding a strange word or idea for the first time and then seeing it everywhere after that. And this, my friend, is the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon at work. It shows how we see the world through a biased lens. At its core, the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon is the strange way our minds tend to focus on a subject or object once it has caught our attention, making it seem like it's more common in our everyday lives. What's interesting is that even though the frequency of the event hasn't changed, our increased awareness changes how we see it, giving the impression that it happens more often. Take the experience of learning a new word or idea as an example. You start to read about it in newspapers, hear it in conversations, and see it in books all of a sudden, as if the universe was trying to flood you with its presence. But the truth is that the word is still used a lot. It's just that we're more aware of it now, which gives it new meaning. As a powerful reminder of how easily our perceptions can change, the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon shows how our awareness and attention shape our reality. From the everyday to the extraordinary, our cognitive filters pick out certain stimuli to make them stronger while blocking out others. This shapes how we feel about the world. This event also shows the complicated relationship between attention, memory, and perception, which gives us useful information about how our minds work. By learning about the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, we can better understand the complex layers of human consciousness and figure out how we see and understand the world. With this knowledge, we can find our way through the maze of our minds more easily and clearly, going beyond the limits of illusion to see the world with more depth and understanding. Remember that the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon may be messing with your mind the next time you notice a new phenomenon happening more often than you thought it would. 4. Priming. Priming is an interesting phenomenon that has its roots in the complexity of human thought. It shows how the things around us shape our minds in subtle but deep ways. By showing how our unconscious processes and outside cues interact in a complex way, it helps us understand how our thoughts, feelings, and actions are affected by these things. Priming is a psychological process in which being exposed to one stimulus, the prime, changes how you react to a related stimulus later on, usually without you being aware of it. Think about this. After hearing a string of words that make you think of old age like gray, wrinkles, and retirement, you start walking more slowly without meaning to. The fact that this effect is so subtle but strong shows how priming affects our everyday lives. The most interesting thing about priming is that it can work below the level of conscious awareness, affecting us without our knowledge or permission. From small linguistic cues to things in our environment, these primes shape our thoughts, attitudes, and actions subtly, pushing us towards certain responses or interpretations. Also, priming affects a lot more than just words and language. It affects many parts of human life. Think about how visual cues affect consumer behavior. A well-placed product display or a subtle scent can make people feel or think of certain things, which can affect their buying decisions without them even realizing it. In the same way, priming can change how we interact with others by changing how we see them through subtle cues like body language or clothing choices. Also, priming's effects don't just happen in the moment of exposure. They can last for a long time, changing the way we think and make decisions in small ways. For example, studies have shown that priming can affect the formation of long-term memories, with repeated exposure to certain stimuli making it easier to remember things that are related to them. Understanding how priming works gives us valuable information about the complex workings of the mind, revealing the subtle forces that control how we think and act. With this knowledge, we can better understand and control our way through the maze of our thoughts and feelings, using the power of priming to shape our experiences in more meaningful and purposeful ways. If you feel like you can't explain why you want to make a certain choice or do a certain thing, think about how priming might be quietly affecting your choices from the depths of your subconscious mind. 5. The bystander effect. When we look at the bystander effect, a complicated social phenomenon with deep roots in how people act, we can learn a lot about how we react in emergencies. These sad events serve as a poignant reminder of how social context and our sense of responsibility can affect what we do or don't do in times of crisis. In its most basic form, the bystander effect is when people don't want to help or step in during an emergency when other people are around. Imagine that someone suddenly passes out in the middle of a busy crowd and needs medical help right away. Even though there are a lot of people around and the person is clearly in pain, no one steps forward to help. This happens when people think that someone else will do something, which leads to a collective state of inaction. It is called a diffusion of responsibility. Many complex ideas in social psychology explain the bystander effect. Some of these ideas are pluralistic ignorance, diffusion of responsibility, and social influence. People experience pluralistic ignorance when they think that others do not see the situation as an emergency, which leads to a misunderstanding of how bad the situation is. This, along with the diffusion of responsibility, which means that people feel less responsible for their actions when they are with other people, makes it very hard to do anything. On top of that, the bystander effect shows how strongly social norms and expectations affect how we act. When people are around other people, they may follow what they think are the rules for not getting involved, afraid to go against the group's behavior for fear of being socially rejected or socially isolated. From a social psychology point of view, this tendency to follow group norms makes sense. However, it can be very dangerous in emergencies where quick action is needed. To create a culture of shared responsibility and action, it is important to understand the bystander effect. By making people more aware of this problem and encouraging people to take responsibility for their actions, we can lessen its negative effects and give bystanders the tools they need to act quickly when they see something wrong. Intervention training programs are very important for fighting the bystander effect and building a sense of compassion and community unity in communities. These programs give people the skills and confidence to step in and help in times of emergency. The bystander effect shows how fragile the balance is between personal choice and social influence. It also shows how important it is to take action to fight the inertia of inaction. By encouraging a culture of alertness, compassion, and shared responsibility, we can work toward a world where bystanders become active agents of good change, ready to help out when it's needed most. Stoicism encourages individuals to approach sex and beauty with moderation, self-discipline, and a focus on inner virtue rather than external desires. By practicing self-control and cultivating virtuous qualities, the Stoics believe that individuals can attain a deeper sense of fulfillment and contentment in their lives. 6. Anchoring bias. Anchoring bias is an interesting cognitive phenomenon that is deeply ingrained in the way people make decisions. It gives us deep insights into how our minds work and the subtle biases that affect how we see and judge things. At its core, anchoring bias is the tendency to focus on the first piece of information we see when making a choice, which then affects our judgment in subsequent evaluations in a way that supports it. Picture yourself starting a journey to choose with a lot of information and choices at your disposal. Even though there are a lot of options, the first piece of information, the anchor, has the most impact on the decisions you make next. Whether we are aware of it or not, this anchor shapes how we see things and makes us make decisions that aren't fair. Anchoring bias has big effects on many areas of people's lives, from making financial plans and negotiating to understanding consumer behavior and medical diagnoses. As an example, think about negotiations. The first offer is like a strong anchor that has a big effect on the rest of the bargaining process. People who are set on a high initial offer might not want to stray too far from this point of reference, even if doing so would make things better. Additionally, anchoring bias brings to light the natural limits of human intelligence, shedding light on the subtle shortcuts and heuristics that guide our decision-making processes. When accurate assessment is very important, like when planning your finances or getting a medical diagnosis, relying on an arbitrary anchor can cause big mistakes in judgment that could have very bad results. That being said, anchoring bias is sneaky because it has a big effect and often works without people being aware of it. Even people who are very knowledgeable about how to make rational decisions can be swayed by its appeal, giving in to the initial anchor's pull without meaning to. Realizing that anchoring bias exists is the first thing that can be done to lessen its effects and make decision-making more objective. By consciously challenging the initial anchor's validity, people can try to avoid the cognitive shortcuts that lead to biased judgments, which will lead to more fair and well-informed outcomes in the long run. To put it simply, anchoring bias is a powerful reminder of how complicated human thought is. It shows how important it is to be alert and think critically when making decisions. We can work toward a more fair and rational world where decisions are based on reason instead of the arbitrary influence of the first piece of information we come across by recognizing and addressing this cognitive bias. 7. Implicit bias. Implicit bias is a complicated issue that has its roots in how people think and how society has conditioned them. It is a powerful reminder of the subtle but pervasive forces that shape our thoughts, feelings, and actions. Implicit bias is made up of the unconscious attitudes or stereotypes that affect how we understand, act, and make decisions. These biases often work below the level of conscious awareness. Imagine that as you go through the complicated process of social interactions, your thoughts and actions are affected by a wide range of unconscious biases that are ingrained in your mind. You develop these biases over time by being exposed to cultural stories, societal norms, and your own experiences. They affect how you see people based on their race, gender, age, or socioeconomic status. Take the widespread negative ideas about people of different races as an example. These ideas come from past wrongs and unfair systems that still affect everyone today. Even though we say we care about equality and inclusion, these unconscious biases affect how we think, what we do, and how we interact with others. Also, implicit biases don't have to show up as overtly racist thoughts or actions. They can also show up in subtle, complex ways that are hard to notice or look into. Microaggressions, unconscious favoritism, and systemic inequalities are just a few of the ways that implicit bias affects society. It keeps differences alive and undermines efforts to be fair and include everyone. To make society more fair and welcoming, we need to be aware of and work on our implicit biases. As we become more aware of the unconscious biases that shape our thoughts and actions, We can start to break down the systems of discrimination and oppression that keep social injustice going. This needs us to be dedicated to self-reflection, education, and empathy, to questioning our preconceived ideas and the beliefs and assumptions that support implicit bias. In addition, changing the policies, practices, and institutions that keep inequality going is needed to deal with implicit bias. Efforts to fight implicit bias must be all-encompassing and long-lasting, and include things like diversity training programs, hiring practices that include everyone, and the enforcement of anti-discrimination laws. Implicit bias is a stark reminder of how complicated human thought and social dynamics are. It shows how important it is to be aware, think about ourselves, and work together to make things fair and inclusive. We can work toward a world where everyone is valued, respected, and given the tools they need to succeed, no matter their race, gender, or background, by facing our implicit biases head-on. Stoicism encourages individuals to approach sex and beauty with moderation, self-discipline, and a focus on inner virtue rather than external desires. By practicing self-control and cultivating virtuous qualities, the Stoics believe that individuals can attain a deeper sense of fulfillment and contentment in their lives. 8. The power of conformity. If you want to understand how complicated human social behavior is, read The Power of Conformity. It shows how deeply group norms and expectations affect how people think and act. It shows how naturally we want to align our thoughts, feelings, and actions with those of the group, even if it means sacrificing our own beliefs or values. This natural desire to fit in is deeply rooted in the human mind and is shaped by a multitude of psychological, social, and cultural factors. Imagine that you are in a crowd of people who are all affected by the group's energy and are changing how they think and act without even realizing it. This is called conformity, and it goes back to our evolutionary roots when early humans had to work together and get along with others to stay alive. So the desire to follow group rules is deeply ingrained in us and is a key part of keeping society together and feeling like we belong. Many things make conformity strong, from subtle social cues and unspoken expectations to overt forms of pressure and coercion. Social conformity can happen because someone wants to be liked and accepted, is afraid of being shunned or rejected, or just wants to keep the peace in the group. There is a subtle but strong effect that these forces have on our thoughts and actions, shaping our ideas about what is socially acceptable or desirable. Conformity also affects larger social phenomena like groupthink and herd behavior, not just individual behavior. Groupthink happens when the desire for agreement and harmony within a group takes precedence over independent thought and judgment. This leads to bad decisions and following false beliefs or ideologies. In the same way, herd behavior is when people tend to do what the bigger group does, which can lead to actions that aren't logical or are bad for the group as a whole. Understanding the power of conformity can help you understand a lot of things in society, from political ideas and cultural norms to consumer choices and fashion trends. When it comes to buying things, for example, conformity can make people copy the tastes and buying habits of their peers, which can lead to the spread of trends and fads in society. As with other areas of life, political behavior can be affected by partisan beliefs and group memberships, which can keep society divided. The power of conformity shows how complicated it is for individuals to be free and still be influenced by others. It also shows how important it is to find a balance between wanting to fit in and protecting one's own identity. Realizing the subtle forces that affect our actions and thoughts can help us become more self-aware and give us more control over our lives, allowing us to handle the currents of social influence with more independence and wisdom. 9. The overconfidence effect. Researchers have found that the overconfidence effect is a fascinating look into how our minds work. It shows that we often have too much faith in our abilities and judgments. This cognitive bias, which has its roots in the complicated ways people see and judge themselves, makes people overestimate their skills or knowledge in a certain area, even when there is clear evidence to the contrary. This event has huge effects on how decisions are made, how plans are made, and even how people interact with each other. Imagine starting a project or task with a level of confidence that is almost arrogant, only to run into problems or setbacks that you didn't see coming. This situation, which is typical of the overconfidence effect, shows how our perceived abilities don't match up with what we actually can do. People who are overconfident stick to their beliefs even when there is more and more evidence that they should be cautious or reevaluate, which is usually bad for them. Cognitive biases, self-serving attributions, and selective attention are just a few of the psychological issues that are at the root of the overconfidence effect. Overconfidence can be appealing for many reasons, such as wanting to show that you are competent and sure of yourself, or not wanting to face the uncertainty or complexity of a situation. In addition, the overconfidence effect affects more than just individual decisions. It affects all parts of human life. When it comes to financial planning, for example, investors who are too sure of themselves may think they can predict market trends or do better than the market, which can lead to risky investments and losses. In the same way, overconfidence can show up in social situations as arrogance or dismissiveness, which turns people off and makes it harder to communicate and work together. Being aware of our tendency to be too sure of ourselves is important for developing humility and encouraging critical self-reflection. By being aware of what we don't know and what we can't do, we can avoid the problems that come with being too sure of ourselves and instead develop an open, curious, and willing to learn mindset. To go through this process, we have to be ready to face our own biases and blind spots and see uncertainty and complexity as chances to learn and grow. Also, to lessen the bad effects of overconfidence, we need to create a culture of accountability and openness, where people feel free to question assumptions, look for different points of view, and work together to solve problems. We can lessen the bad effects of overconfidence and encourage more well-informed, evidence-based decision-making by creating an environment that values intellectual and moral humility. The overconfidence effect is a moving reminder of how complicated human thought is. It shows how important it is to find the right balance between confidence and humility. We can handle the complicated world with more clarity, wisdom, and strength if we recognize our tendency to be too sure of ourselves and adopt a mindset of humility and critical self-reflection. Stoicism encourages individuals to approach sex and beauty with moderation, self-discipline, and a focus on inner virtue rather than external desires. By practicing self-control and cultivating virtuous qualities, the Stoics believe that individuals can attain a deeper sense of fulfillment and contentment in their lives. 10. The Pygmalion effect. The fascinating psychological effect known as the Pygmalion effect is based on perception and expectation. It gives us deep insights into how belief and behavior are deeply connected. This effect, which is also called the self-fulfilling prophecy, shows how higher expectations can lead to a huge boost in performance, which can have a huge impact on a person's path to success. At its core, the Pygmalion effect shows how belief can change things, showing how the way someone thinks about their abilities can affect how hard they work, how long they keep trying, and ultimately how successful they are. Imagine being given a task or goal and being supported by the unwavering faith and trust of those around you. This situation, which is typical of the Pygmalion effect, shows how the expectations placed on people can push them to do their best. When people are told they can do great things, they often step up to the challenge and put all of their effort and energy into reaching those high goals. For example, self-efficacy, motivation, and mindset are all deep psychological issues that are at the heart of the Pygmalion effect. People who think they are capable are more likely to act in ways that help them succeed, like being persistent, resilient, and ready to face challenges head-on. The Pygmalion effect also shows how interpersonal dynamics and social influence can change a person's behavior and performance. When someone says they believe in our abilities, we take that as a compliment and often try to live up to those expectations through our actions. Also, the Pygmalion effect affects more than just individual success. It affects many areas of human life, such as education, work performance, sports, and creative activities. For example, in the classroom, teachers who have high expectations for their students are more likely to offer support, encouragement, and chances to grow, which creates a cycle of success and achievement. In the same way, managers who believe in their employees' potential are more likely to invest in their growth, which leads to higher job satisfaction, higher productivity, and overall success for the company. Knowing that the Pygmalion effect has the power to change things makes it even more important to build a culture of believing and expecting the best in ourselves and others. We can use the power of belief to bring about positive change and success by creating a space where everyone feels valued, supported, and able to reach their full potential. To do this, we need to commit to developing a growth mindset, seeing challenges as chances to learn and grow, and questioning the beliefs that might be holding us back. The Pygmalion effect also shows how leaders, teachers, and mentors can change the beliefs and expectations of the people they are responsible for. By creating an environment with high expectations and giving people the help and tools they need to succeed, these influential people can inspire people to go beyond what they think are their limits. This can help people reach their full potential and leave a legacy of success. The Pygmalion effect is a strong reminder of how belief can change things, showing how expectations have a huge effect on how people act and what they achieve. By using the natural power of belief and expectation, we can motivate people to do great things, build their resilience, and help them reach their full potential. Finally, we looked at 10 interesting psychological phenomena that help us understand how complicated human behavior is. From cognitive dissonance and the halo effect to the Pygmalion effect, and more, each of these interesting phenomena teaches us something important about how we see, think, and interact with others. It's time to think about what you've learned. What did you notice most? What happened or what you learned that struck a chord with you? Is there something you'll use in your own life? Feel free to tell us what you think in the space below. Share with us one thing you learned from this video and how you're going to use it. Your ideas not only add to the conversation, but they also help you understand more and remember what you've learned. Please leave a comment below if you liked this video and found it helpful. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interesting videos about psychology and human behavior. Thank you for seeing.